welcome to Talkin Bible 4. It's kind of crazy that it's number 4 already.
Yeah.
But anyway, we're back, so we have a video for you, and we're going to discuss, as in the past few episodes, one of the questions that Juan has for us, and see how that goes. So again, in this case, we're alternating, so I picked the question, Juan doesn't know what it is, so
Not since I wrote it.
Right, yeah, exactly.
I don't know which one you've picked.
So you know one of the 5 or 6 that it's going to be, but...
I don't remember them. I tried not to look at them before
All
I
right.
did this.
So in other words, he's not ready for this. So we'll see what happens. So the question I have is question number 5, which says, does Jesus want you to spread his fame, and if so, how?
Okay.
So we did talk about this one quite a bit, at least in our group, but we actually got through almost all of them, so, didn't let that factor in too much whether or not we had discussed it. So it's not going to be new, but see if we can go a little more in depth. So the verse is Matthew chapter 9, 29 through 31. So I'll read that now. It says, "Then he touched their eyes and said, 'Because of your faith it will happen.' Then their eyes were opened, and they could see. Jesus sternly warned them, 'Don't tell anyone about this.' But instead they went out and spread his fame all over the region."
Okay.
So what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, love this question. Because I think, well, first the answer is yes. I think we are in right there. We were in Matthew chapter 9 and 10. Jesus in the middle of his ministry, and he was giving people a lot of these commands after healing them or speaking with them, just telling them not to reveal what they had learned about him, because it just wasn't the right time.
Right.
But just like these guys, a lot of people just went off and did it anyway, because when something amazing happens in your life, how can you contain it to yourself? It's like if you went home right now and there was a brand new Mercedes waiting for you, that'd be pretty amazing, and you'd want to probably tell some people about that,
Yeah, I don't think I'd be able to keep that to
Yeah.
myself.
So that's what we see with those, with those guys in that instance. But that changed, right? Ultimately, Jesus became very okay with people knowing, and he started to even do so many things and say in so many ways that he, that he is the Son of Man, that he is the Son of God, here with us. And I think that that's a very important thing for anyone to know. That is good news. That is better than getting a Mercedes when you get home, because it means that the God who created everything, who created us, came here to earth, was among us, taught us, and then died for our sins, right? Paid the price for our sins so that we could be made whole, so that we could be forgiven and have a new life and an eternity with him. And so today I was actually sharing with some high school students about this. We were I had brought a devotional that talked about this, about sharing our faith, about spreading Jesus's fame, inviting others to know him and to know about him, because it really is the most amazing thing. Everything else in this life is going to pass and fade away, but not Jesus, and not our souls, and our spirit, who can be with him after our bodies have passed, and this life on this side of eternity is done with, and so when we know that, and when we have that news, it's the most amazing thing in the world. And so it's like, why wouldn't we want to share it with our friends, with our family, with our teammates, with our classmates, with everyone in the world? And I think that's the reason why we have the gospel. It's the reason why we have the Bible. If you think about it, like, Jesus wanted us to know him. He wanted to be known. God wanted to be known. So he pursued us and revealed himself in so many ways. And now he chooses to do it in so many ways through us. He invites us in the Great Commission, right, to go and make disciples of all the nations, so that we are a part in that. But yeah. Anyway, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I mean, just like you said, I think for sure the answer is yes. He makes that very clear later on. And I think I liked how you said it, that, yeah, it just wasn't the right time, at the beginning, because people didn't really understand who he was. And it was going to be, in part very easy for them to spread a wrong message. And, Jesus isn't just like a genie, right? I think we've talked about this before, but, he doesn't just want to, we can't just, rub the lamp and he's going to come out and give us whatever we want. So, again, I think people start to just kind of see Jesus as someone who would heal them, and just kind of give them that. But he was so much more. And I think as time went on, people began to understand that. And so for us now, especially with him being gone, it is up to us now to share the gospel with others. And I think it's easy to be hesitant about that sometimes, because I think we can almost deceive ourselves into, well, it's more loving not to push people, to just kind of let them do their own thing and not really bother them, or maybe we're afraid if we do that, people are going to think we're different and we're kind of weird or whatever. There's a lot of reasons not to, but ultimately, we're called to love people, and the most loving thing we can do is to share the gospel with them. So, yeah, do you have any other thoughts on that? And then I do have a follow-up question, too.
Yeah, I did want to ask you, I mean, you went into it, but that was going to be my follow-up question is, why do people seem to hesitate, or not do that? And I think you named some of the reasons there, but I think that there's many ways to do that. That's the thing about it, right? Is like how do you do that? Do you go to the top of the building where you're at and like scream it from the rooftop? That's one way, I guess. But God calls each and every one of us, maybe perhaps to do that differently. In some ways, in some ways it's similar for all of us, right? By the way that we live, by the choices that we make, by the way that we talk, by the just the way that we live our lives on an everyday basis. But then based on what that looks like for you and your environment and your circumstances, that could look different than for me. For some of us it's being the best student and the best employee that we can be, maybe just being kind and loving to those around us, and all those things open up doors and opportunities to then share who Jesus is, how he's impacted our lives. For someone like me that's in ministry, that takes on a lot of different shapes and forms, from week to week in my, pursuit of engaging in relationship with students, to share, Jesus with them. And for everyone, it takes on different forms, right? So there's this one way in which we're all called, to just shine the light. But I think the most important question, rather than trying to imitate the way, that someone might be doing that's unique to them, is just to be conscious of it, to be intentional about it, and then to ask God, like, how can I do that today? Thinking about your day, where you're going to be, who you're going to run into, and how can I, in those places and in those spaces where I'm going to be, knowing how important this is, right? That people need to know, because it's good for them. It's salvation for them, for every single one of us. So having that knowledge and being intentional with that, then just saying, how can I be used to further that mission and that calling today, wherever I'm going to be,
Yeah, and funny thing, that was kind of my follow-up question was, how can we share the gospel and spread Jesus' fame? But I mean, yeah, just like you said, it looks different for everybody. God doesn't say, here's exactly how I want you to do this. Follow this list or these guidelines, right? And you'll be good. I mean, he wants us to, he made us all different. He made us all unique, and so, how we live our lives is going to reflect that. But, I think, like you said, we need to be intentional about it. That's very important, because I think it's easy for us as Christians to think, well, if we just, live our lives and try to, please God over all of it, that's, will that's the same thing almost, and that's obviously God calls us to do that, but He also does, I believe, call us to be intentional, right, with sharing the gospel. So I think there is an element too that if we really try to glorify God and honor Him in all that we do, that we will be an example and that other people are going to notice that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think also that gives us an opportunity then to take it a step further and actually share the gospel.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's a blend and it's of both. It's tough to know exactly the right balance, but I think we don't need to get it perfectly either. I think that would probably be my other reason too, that I probably tend to, be a little bit hesitant to do that at times, is because, I'm afraid, oh, if I don't do it perfectly, what if I mess up?
Yeah.
It's like, Jesus doesn't say, share the gospel perfectly. He says, just do it.
Yeah.
It's like practice makes perfect with everything, including this. So you just have to kind of just do it, to allow God to work in you and not worry about doing it perfectly yourself as well.
Yeah, and I would add just one more thing that, how do we become intentional, right? And I think that intentionality comes from the overflow of what's in your heart, right? So, because you are intentional every day about certain things, and those are the things that are important to you. If it's important for you to go and get good grades at school, then you're very intentional about doing your homework and studying and, doing whatever it takes for you to achieve that goal, because that's what's in your heart. That's what's important to you, And so I think that, that we need to think about a lot and understand what God has done for us, right? And in doing so, it reminds us of God's goodness. It reminds us of how many things we need to be grateful for and thankful for that God has done in our lives. And I think that even in recounting those things, it reminds us that God is capable, and that, what He's done in my life, we want to see that happen in the lives of people around us. Again, we're not just trying to share the gospel with people to recruit them for our team so that we can just have a bigger team, and be more powerful or whatever, like we're, trying to dominate. It's not for that, right? It's because there's salvation for each and every single person, right? Because each and every one of us is broken, and we need Jesus to mend us and to make us whole, right? And to give us abundant life, which is what is being offered to every single person. And so it really then becomes about knowing Jesus. And I don't know if you remember me sharing this in the past, but I've shared before, like, the greatest thing that you can do for others is for you to have Jesus as your number one priority, and for you to be pursuing God and knowing God every single day. Because again, then the intentionality for evangelism or service ministry, whatever it is going to flow out of that relationship, right? As I fall more and more in love with Jesus, I'm going to become, more and more like Jesus. And that's the process of transformation and sanctification that He's taken us through. And so the key for each of us is actually, moving closer to God, right? And allowing Him to, that root from that seed to then start to grow in our hearts, which is the work that He does. So we need to be intentional, we need to be mindful of it and think about that, and that'll produce some pretty good results. But the most important thing is, what am I doing today to get closer to God, to know God more? And I think that everything else just kind of overflows out of that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I agree. If you make God your number one priority, it's kind of like, it's a domino effect that everything else falls into place underneath Him. And so, and it's not going to be seamless either. You're going to have ups and downs, right? Just with anything, but just about taking it one day at a time, taking each step and just trying to get closer to Him and live as He would have us.
Yeah, and I think this is this is like a question that I could talk all day about. And I know when we first started these videos, we wanted to limit them to like 10 minutes.
Yeah, it's not
because
happening.
I just feel like people will watch more if they're shorter, that's what I do too, depending on what the content is. But I don't care. So that what we were just talking about making God your priority and the number one thing in your life, and then everything else kind of flows out of that. It makes sense, like you said, that domino effect. But yet, I just feel like so many of us struggle with that.
Yeah, I do too.
Because it doesn't seem that obvious, I guess. There's other things that maybe are more immediate and more present right now in our lives, that are obstructing our view, or taking the place of God. And I think in that sense, in some ways it requires the first initial act of faith, is to say, regardless of that, God, I'm going to put you first, and I'm going to invest in this over all those things. And then we start to see the fruit of that, and then that makes sense, and while it may be still challenging to do that, we kind of see how all that falls into place. But I just feel like a lot of people, a lot of high school students, a lot of middle school students, individuals that I interact with all the time, it seems like it is hard for them to like actually make that connection or to take that leap to say, I'm going to commit to doing that. I'm going to put God as the number one thing in my life. I find just that a lot of us have feelings that we love God and are very grateful for him and acknowledge that he's there, but then when it actually comes to committing to taking that step, although we know that that's the best decision that you can make and that so many good things in your life are going to follow from that, it's like very hard for people. Maybe it was for me too, back then. That was a long time ago, but it's still a temptation every day, because there's so many things that want to come and get in the way, right? And they're fighting for like that number one position in my life, my own sins and my flesh and other responsibilities or whatever. But even for me, it's an everyday struggle to keep God in that number one position in my life and trust that everything else is going to get worked out because of that and through that. It's just a message that I think I would like everyone to think about and understand, and work through. That if things maybe aren't the way that you want them to be in your life right now, often we think, well, I need to get things in order and then I'll be in a good position to come to God. It's like, no, come to God now, make him your priority now, and then watch him put all those things in your life in order, because that's what he's going to do. That's what he does, and I just feel like that message can't be said enough, until people start, the people that we love and care for in our lives, we're kind of doing it right now, just that question of Jesus and his fame, and sharing that with others, but that's the core of it, that giving our lives over to Jesus is the best thing that any of us can do. And it doesn't mean that our lives are going to become perfect, but we'll be in an intimate relationship with the creator of the universe, who holds us in his hands and is promises to be with us no matter what, on top of just the promise of eternity. So anyway.
Yeah, just to, share my experience just briefly, very briefly. But, yeah, I've struggled with that too at times. It's not easy. And I think part of that, at least for me, has been because, well, it all comes down to faith, I think. It takes faith to, like you said, take that step to really put God first in our lives. But it doesn't stop there. It takes faith to continue to do that. I think that's what's hard, because I think I've seen, for me, it's like, okay, I commit to putting God first. I, read my Bible. I'm praying. I'm doing well. But it's like, as soon as you start to do well and kind of get on a roll almost, it's so easy to kind of take credit for it and be like, yeah, I'm doing awesome. And then you start to focus on yourself again. And then things start to slide. Yep. And then it's kind of like sleep almost. Yeah. You don't really realize how much of an effect it has on you until you don't get enough of it. Yeah. And then things just start to, you don't act the same, you're getting upset at people, you have less patience, and it's like, well, why? And, so I think God's work in us is kind of the same thing at times, that we don't always even realize when it's happening, but we really miss it when we don't have that.
That's true.
And so it just takes faith that while especially after we've taken that step, to continue to do it, because it's so important. It's easy to lose sight of that, I think.
Yeah. Well, I think we've covered a lot there, and probably have gone on too long. Maybe we can promise to make the next one shorter.
Yeah, we'll see. It probably won't happen, but we can try.
Yeah, we'll try very hard to be concise. But close it out, dude.
All right. Yeah. Well, thanks for watching, everybody. We enjoy this. Hopefully, you enjoy watching it. So definitely going to keep it coming. So again, as Juan said, please subscribe so you can see the next one, and all that follow. And again, comment and let us know what you like, what you don't like, what you want to see, and we definitely would like to know. So hope you enjoy it, and we'll see you next time.
Signing off. Yeah. Thanks.